So this is
not the Bigger Pockets podcast.
This is the 6,000 square foot Spanish mansion that I am buying with my friend Rob Abasolo. And in this video, you will see the 5 criteria that we analyzed this property in regards of the lens that we looked at it through, which is why we eventually decided on this property and not others. And these are the same 5 criteria that we use to analyze potential future properties that we'll be buying together. So I said, hey, we need to actually sit down and come up with the things we're going to look at every property through this window, so that before we even bring it to the table to discuss, we know what we're discussing. Like, what are we looking at in this property? Otherwise, it's just an ROI game. Why don't we jump into what the 5 categories are? We'll explain why we look at these and how we think as you're looking at investment property, you should be using a very similar system. Why don't you start it off, Rob? We'll start with ROI.
Yeah, ROI. So this one, most of the time, the gold standard for looking at an investment is cash on cash. Well, really my philosophy for a while now is I'm looking for a cash on cash that is, typically at least 20%. I like looking for stuff that's 30, 40, 50%. But one of the things that we discovered is the more luxury you go, the more money you spend, the harder it is to achieve those really, really big ROIs. And so now when I'm looking at like a $2 to $3 million property, I'm a lot more okay with the 15 to 20% cash on cash.
The way that I like to look at ROI is there's 2 metrics that you use when determining it. You take what you make in a year and you divide it by how much money you put into the deal. And it's important to understand the math of real estate. You don't have to be a math genius, but you do have to understand that there's 2 inputs here: how much you made in a year and how much you put into the deal. And that means that you can improve ROI by manipulating either of those inputs. Now, one input, how much you make in a year, is where everybody tends to focus. Can I push rents higher? It's just hard because you don't control that. You get what you get. The market controls rents, not you. The other lever, how much money you put into a deal, is something you have more control over. It's a longer, more powerful lever. So when you're trying to improve ROI, it's more sensible and wiser to think about how you can put less capital in a deal, as opposed to how you can only just maximize income.
Sure. Okay, well, let's talk about equity now. I think that's our factor here, number 2 of our criteria. There are 5. We call this a Baker's quadrant because it's a bonus 5. But number 2 in this is appreciation / equity. So this is kind of where I've had a light bulb moment recently where, yes, cash flow has been very important to me, but then I sort of solved the cash flow problem this year through all my different income streams. And I started examining all of my different real estate, and I realized that the appreciation of my portfolio greatly outperformed the cash flow that I had on any given year.
So some properties and areas grow faster than others. So what we're always looking to do is get all 3 of them if we can. We want to buy in the area that we think is going to appreciate faster than everywhere else. We want to buy it at the best price possible. And then we want to add equity in any ways we can. The thing is, when you're looking at individual properties, like this one, for instance, that we looked at, there was very little we could do to build equity on this property. There's like, we have to fix the sport court, and maybe we're going to do cool things like add some ATVs or mountain bikes, but it's not really gonna make the property work more. It's probably just going to make it easier to rent out on Airbnb. The property was in great shape. There's not a ton we could do to buy equity because we got it for less than what they wanted, and we got it for less than appraised for, but not by a huge amount. Like, just some properties, the sellers are not motivated. They're not going to do that. So instead, what we focused on was, this is an area that we think is going to go up a lot over time, and we're going to create equity that way. So when you're only focused on cash flow, you don't think about 10 years in the future, where the equity that you have created, as well as the cash flows that will be increasing if you buy in the right area, are going to make you more than just what you're making in day 1 right out the gate.
So let's move on to number 3 here, which is debt. Tell us a little bit about this pillar and why it's very important in a luxury property like this.
So the first thing to understand is it's a tool, and tools can be used in good ways and bad. If you give an experienced carpenter a hammer, he can get a nail in the wood a lot faster. If you give it to a child, it's a great way for them to hurt themselves. So we're not saying everybody needs to go use these tools the same way that we are. Just understand it's a tool. And our belief is that prices are going to continue to go up because the government is printing more money, and because there's not a lot of good other options to invest in. Real estate is the best one. So we're actually wanting to take on as much debt as we can. Now, debt also factors into your ROI. And here's the way that I want to talk about that. If you think about real estate compared to stocks, in stocks, you really don't borrow money. In real estate, you do. If we go buy a $500,000 real estate asset, we are going to be putting down 20%. So that's $100,000. We're going to be borrowing $400,000. Now, let's say we see a 20% increase in the price of that asset over a period of time. With real estate, a 20% increase means it would go from 500 to 600,000. So we will have gained $100,000 in equity, and we put down $100,000 of money. If you look at stocks and you go buy $500,000 of stocks, you didn't borrow any money, so you just put $500,000 into it, and then they go up by 20%. Your stocks went from 500 to 600,000, so you gained 100 grand, but you had to put down 500 grand to get that 100 grand, meaning you got a 20% return. So the exact same investment in real estate versus stocks will give you a 20% return versus a 100% return if you're able to use leverage. And that's why the wise use debt to grow their wealth faster. They're doing it with other people's money because the banks have all this money that they want to lend, but they don't know how to invest in real estate like we do.
You mentioned something a little earlier, which is about the amenities that come with the luxury property. Now, obviously, with more amenities comes a little bit more time in management of that property. And that was another pillar of ours, which is time. So what does that mean to you in respect to buying a luxury property?
So everyone starts off their journey, or most people do, where they have a lot of time, but not very much money. So of course they chase ROI because that's the part that makes the most sense. But if you do your job well, you should be growing in equity. You should be growing in opportunities. You probably start a couple businesses that branch off of the investing that you did. Now you don't have enough time. So as you're evaluating a property, the fourth criteria that we look at is how much time will it take to operate it. So if we can put all of our resources into a property that theoretically reduces our time by 10%, that's a win for us because it means we can buy more properties before we run out of time. And then the last one, number 5 that we're going to talk about, that's going up too.
Yeah, 5 being risk. And I think when we talk about risk, we talk about regulations in an area and how much that's going to threaten the property that you're buying. So typically for me, when I'm looking at short-term rental investments, I'm trying to find a short-term rental investment that is in a short-term rental friendly area. So a big example of this would be Tennessee. Gatlinburg is very known for being like the #1 Airbnb destination in the country. 15 million people visited the Smoky Mountains last year. That's over 1 million people a month. The whole economy rides on short-term rental, so there's a very large amount of people that are cleaning, handymen, contractors. They all make their livelihood on short-term rentals, so we can pretty safely assume that Gatlinburg is probably not going to try to cut off short-term rentals, because if they did, they would be choking off a very large part of their economy.
Yeah, and we also see in areas like that there's a lot of Californians that are moving there. And if you have more population going into an area that is bringing more income with them, and there's nowhere else to vacation, that's where they're going to go. You absolutely want to look at risk in your portfolio. Like, how much risk am I adding by doing this? And short-term rentals are riskier than long-term rentals. You always have to wonder about legislation making it illegal. You can have 1 or 2 bad reviews that can trash your entire business and take you a long time to come back from. One tenant in a long-term rental isn't going to trash your ability to get income in something like that. So as I'm buying property, I'm also looking at, well, how much risk am I taking on when I do this particular deal, and getting a feel and weighing that into how much money it might be making, what it might be appreciating, how much time I'm going to put into it, etc. We will continue to make more content. Check out our other videos on this particular property if you want to see how we use these 5 tools to get to the place where we bought this deal. And as always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe this content, and we will keep it coming.
You can find me on YouTube as well at Rob Built. And yeah, go smash that subscribe button for me. And this one too. Smash the subscribe button on this video as well.
Just smash it everywhere. Hulk out, everybody.